first epistle, chapter 3. Beloved, be all like-minded in prayer, compassionate, lovers of the brethren, merciful, reserved, humble, not rendering evil for evil or abuse for abuse, but on the contrary, blessing. For unto this were you called, that you might inherit a blessing. For he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek after peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the just, his ears unto their prayers. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil. And who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you suffer anything for justice' sake, blessed are you. So have no fear of their fear, do not be troubled, but bless the Lord Christ in your hearts. Please stand for a reading of today's Holy Gospel, which is taken from that according to St. Matthew, chapter 5. At that time, Jesus said to his disciples, unless your justice exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to the ancients, thou shalt not kill, and that whoever shall murder shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift before the altar, and go first to be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. For a blessing on the sermon, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Please be seated. Whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Today, Jesus is talking about the sin of anger. And I'm sure that most of us have, at some time in our life, perhaps more than once, perhaps quite frequently, we've experienced this desire to feel our knuckles against someone's facial cartilage. And so I'd like to speak to you today about this subject of anger in 3 points. Firstly, what is anger? Secondly, the evil of anger. And thirdly, how to control our anger. Let's begin with our first point. What is anger? Anger can be understood both as a desire and as a feeling. In terms of a desire, this means a desire for revenge. And anger that is directed against sin and injustice is, in fact, a good thing. We see this especially nowadays as the world is going absolutely crazy. The stupidities of the so-called experts, the stupidities of the politicians, the stupidities of the church hierarchy. And this is the kind of anger that the psalmist speaks about, saying, be angry, but do not sin. Psalm 4, verse 4. However, inordinate anger, even about things that are lawful to be angry about, would certainly be offensive to God. Now, anger, besides being a desire, is also at times a feeling of displeasure or hostility. And because of the effects of original sin, we simply do not have complete control over our emotions, over our feelings. Now, our feelings in themselves are not something bad because God has created our emotions. In themselves, they are something good. But we must not give in to our emotions. We must not wallow in our emotions. Whenever we are under a strong emotion, we have to ask ourselves, is this feeling, this emotion, leading me towards God, or is it leading me away from God? And that way we'll know whether it's a good thing or not. Now, how do we react to these emotions? On the one hand, we can simply give in to our emotions, and that's wrong. At the opposite extreme, we can suppress our emotions, and that's also not good. Whereas in the middle, we are meant to moderate our emotions. That's why it's important for us to bring the emotions, our feelings, into the control of our reason, and especially of grace. As we all know, that is the work of a lifetime. Merely suppressing anger is not a good thing because it goes into our subconscious and eventually it will erupt. People who tend to suppress their anger, they become like this pressure cooker and eventually they just explode. And as a result, we must deal constructively with our anger. And we'll be seeing that in our third point today. We can also ask, why do we get angry? Oftentimes we'll get angry when we feel that our security, our affection, or our control is being threatened. And we're much more likely to become angry when we have been working too much, when we are stressed out, when we're tired, when we're feeling insecure, feeling unappreciated or powerless. And it can be helpful in those times that we ask ourselves, what makes me angry? There's also the case of misplaced anger. To give an example of this, let's say that you're actually mad with your boss at work and you would really like to put your fist in his face. But you know that if you make contact with his facial cartilage, you know that you're actually going to get fired. So you can't do that. So what do? You withhold it at work and you take it home. It's like almost like you have this little box, and you take your anger home with you, and then you let it out of the box, like Pandora's box, and the anger comes out at your spouse, at your children, at the dog. This is what we call a misplaced anger. Now, anger can sometimes also mask fear. We don't like the feeling of fear because fear makes us feel like we are out of control or that we are weak. Whereas anger as an emotion makes us feel powerful, makes us feel strong. That's why most people prefer this feeling of anger. And so angry people are usually very fearful people, actually. And that's why they need to ask themselves, what am I afraid of? Just to give one possible example, this is a common example. So let's say that you're getting angry with your spouse. Why? It might be because you're afraid of being misunderstood. That's one possibility out of many. Now, with regards to the anger of parents towards your children, yes, this can be legitimate. For example, little Johnny runs out into the street and he could have been run over by a car. Of course mom and dad are going to yell at little Johnny, you get back here right now. That kind of anger is of course legitimate. And that anger actually comes from your love of your child, in fact. So that's understandable. Now, we do need to be careful about becoming angry all the time because children's notions of God are oftentimes learned from the behaviors of the parents. If a parent, especially if a father, is like angry all the time, sometimes, not all the time, thank God, but sometimes the children will grow up thinking that God is a monster. What matters is that even when parents are mad at their kids, and that happens to everyone who doesn't get angry sometimes, is that the kids know that you still love them no matter what. Even if you are angry, you still love them. It can be absolutely okay just to say, honey, just understand that mommy's having a bad day today. That's okay, because the kids know that you still love them. Now, different temperaments deal with anger in different ways. Cholerics, by nature, tend towards anger, and they can stay mad. Because, of course, cholerics like not only to control themselves, but they like to control others, they like to control the world. And so these cholerics, if they don't overcome this lower tendency of theirs, they can actually cause miserable conditions for their family and for their employees. But when a choleric overcomes themselves with God's grace by this holy self-control, and they learn, if they can learn this sensitivity towards others, that really makes them much more Christ-like. That's a beautiful thing when choleric actually cooperates with God's grace. Now, secondly, sanguines can get angry, but it usually passes very quickly. They can be mad one second and then laughing the next. So the same ways they need to be careful of emotional instability, and that can be a real challenge for them too. Melancholics, in the third place, they rarely become angry except with themselves. But when a melancholic becomes angry, it can easily lead to resentment and even to absolute hatred. That's why for melancholics it's very important to run from the first signs of resentment. And they also need to be careful of becoming mad at themselves, because this anger can actually lead melancholics in particular to depression. You know that depression is sometimes referred to as anger turned inwards. Finally, fourthly, the phlegmatics. Phlegmatics are so easy to get along with, especially in community life, because they're like, angry? Why bother getting angry? It's just too much trouble to get angry. And so they're very easy to get along with, but the problem with the temptation for the phlegmatic is to set other people off, because they know where other people's weaknesses are. They know what's going to make others mad, especially cholerics. And so the phlegmatic, just to feel that they've got power over other people, they'll just sort of like push a button, whoop, and you see, like, especially the cleric just sort of explode, and the phlegmatic's just sort of sitting back, enjoying watching the fireworks. This gives them the sense of superiority over the cleric. So they have to be very careful about that. Now, there are also three types of dysfunctional anger. There is firstly aggressive anger, secondly passive aggression, and thirdly perpetual anger. Firstly, aggressive anger is that which explodes. Those of you who are old enough to remember the old show The Honeymooners, Ralph Cramden, that's the perfect example of aggressive anger. And this can destroy the peace of a household or the workplace. Passive aggression is when a person is angry, but they don't show it outwardly. Like an example, if you know the comic strip Pickles, Earl, that's the grandpa, he's a perfect example of passive aggression. He'll give, his wife's name, he gives her the silent treatment all the time. The passive aggressive person, their motto is, I don't get mad, I get even. And so the passive aggressive person can easily sabotage for their workplace, their boss, by not doing their duty. Thirdly, then you get perpetual anger. This is someone who simply will not forgive, and they'll constantly be dredging up the past. In marriage, it usually turns up as sort of like, I remember when you did such and such. And the underlying attitude of this kind of perpetual anger is sort of like, you made me suffer in the past. I'm going to make you suffer for the rest of your life. Now that we've seen what anger is, that brings us to our second point, the evil of anger. In today's gospel, Jesus says, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill, and that whoever kills will be liable to judgment. So the Old Testament said, thou shalt not kill. And the Jews of old might have understood this to mean that simply bad actions against our neighbor were forbidden, but that bad thoughts, unkind thoughts towards others were okay. But Jesus specifies this. He says, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. In other words, the Christian law of charity, the Christian law of love, demands more from us. Not just an external conformity of our actions, but even our thoughts are meant to come under the rule of grace. And Jesus also emphasizes the fact that we are brothers, because even for non-Christians, we still have God as our Father in common. Now, for those of us who are Catholic Christians, those of us who are living in the state of grace, these ties are much closer because we have sanctifying grace within our soul. God dwells in each of us. And as a result, these bonds of faith and charity are much closer. Jesus lives in each one of you. And therefore, faults against our neighbor are actually much worse than we might at first imagine. So the fifth commandment doesn't just forbid killing someone who's innocent, no, it forbids anything that is contrary to fraternal charity. And so in today's gospel, Jesus mentions three sinful behaviors in particular. Firstly, anger. Secondly, insults. And thirdly, a sin that's officially referred to as contumely. Let's go over each of these. So firstly, anger. And we should say there are times when anger is appropriate. But we need to remember that we will be judged for our thoughts even. Hatred. Hatred in a theological sense means wanting someone to burn in hell, which obviously is going to be a mortal sin. Usually, though, when someone says, I hate so-and-so, they don't mean it in the theological sense. When they say, I hate so-and-so, they usually mean something more like, I really dislike his guts, which is going to be a venial sin at most. And if someone actually, when they say, I hate so-and-so, what they really mean is, I hate his bad behaviors, that's actually legitimate, because we have to hate sin when we say, that we hate the behaviors of the politicians nowadays. Now, secondly, Jesus goes on to make a comment with regards to the sin of insulting others. He says, whoever says to his brother, Raka, will be liable to the council. Now, Raka is evidently an Aramaic word that literally means empty. So for us, it might be like calling someone stupid or a numbskull or something like that. It's a slight insult, which is going to be a venial sin. Now, obviously, venial sins do offend God also, so that's why we want to avoid offending God and our neighbor through these insults. Then the third sin that Jesus refers to is what is officially called contumely. So Jesus says, whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the fire of hell. Now, contumely means going up to someone to their face and telling them off in a very rude way. Now, to us it may seem that the word fool doesn't really mean that much, but we have to understand it in the context of the gospel. So it seems that the word fool among the Jews, it was actually like calling someone an atheist or a pagan, which for the Jews would be like the ultimate insult, calling them an atheist. So that was considered the worst thing you could possibly call someone. And so that's why if we destroy a person's reputation unnecessarily, like through the sin of contumely, where you're seriously offending them to their face, this will be a mortal sin. If you simply damage a person's reputation this way without destroying it, this will be a venial sin. And moreover, with these sins of the tongue, when we speak about against our neighbor inappropriately, in the wrong time, in the wrong way, etc., this is not only a sin against charity, but it's also a sin against justice. So that's why we have to make restitution for these sins of the tongue, to make up for them. So that gives us an idea of what the evil of anger is. And that brings us to our third point, how to control our anger. As we mentioned, suppressing our anger is not a good idea. Rather, we need to deal with our anger in a constructive way. And there's a 3-point method that's easy to remember. You can remember it by the mnemonic C.P.R. We can all remember C.P.R. So it stands for, the C stands for cool down. So when you're feeling angry, let yourself cool down first. Then the P stands for pray. Once you've cooled down, say a little prayer to God for light and for peace. The R stands for reflect. Reflect, especially with someone else, to bounce your idea off someone else. Go to a good Catholic friend and say, hey, look, this is the way I handled this situation. This is the way what I said to them. This is what I did to them. Was I right or not? Because by reflecting with someone else, it helps us to become more objective. And that's a good thing. Now, we also need to forgive others and not to hold grudges and not to resent others. Please remember, though, that forgiveness, like any other virtue, is not in the feelings. Forgiveness, like any other virtue, is in fact will. Remember that we do not have control over our feelings. And so as long as we can say, even if it's with gritted teeth, okay, Jesus, I forgive so-and-so, even though I don't feel like I want to, that does count actually as forgiveness. Now, it's a beginning part of forgiveness, obviously, but it's a good place to start, and it will grow from there. But Father, you might say, how can I forgive someone who's not sorry for what they've done? And that's a really good question. So let's look at this. How does God forgive us? He forgives us unconditionally. No matter what we've done, he has already forgiven us. That's why Jesus on the cross says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, just because God has already forgiven us, does that mean that we're all going to heaven? No, because someone can actually put obstacles to receiving God's forgiveness. So that if someone ends up in hell, it's not because God hasn't forgiven them. No, it's because they put up obstacles to receiving His forgiveness. Because someone can put all these obstacles by either not being truly sorry for their sins, for having offended God, or because they're not willing to change their life in the future. And in this case, it's like they're building this big wall, this big barrier between them and God. And God's forgiveness, even though God is forgiveness, it's not, that forgiveness is not actually getting past that barrier, and because they're putting obstacles to it. That's not God's fault. That's their fault for not receiving His forgiveness. So that's how we have to act also. We do have to forgive others no matter what they've done to us, even if they are not disposed to receive our forgiveness, even if they're not sorry for what they've done. So all that God asks from us on our part is just that we have to forgive just as God forgives. But they will only be forgiven when they are actually sorry for what they've done. But all that God asks us is that we do forgive them. A good example of this is tomorrow's saint, Saint Maria Goretti. You may remember the story. This happened back in I think it was around 1906 or so. And Maria was a little girl at home. She was in Italy. She was sewing at home. She was like 11 years old. And the teenager next door, he was like 19 years old, Alphonsus Maria. He broke into the home, and the Goretti home, and because Maria would not sin with him, he then stabbed her to death. I think he stabbed her like 13 times. He died in love. And on the way to the hospital, Maria, who was a really good Catholic girl, she said, "Yes, I do forgive him," even though Alessandro was not sorry. And he was not sorry for many years, because of course he went to prison for his sin of murder, and it was years later in prison that Maria Goretti actually appeared to him in a vision, in a dream. And he said that she was picking lilies, and she placed the lilies, lilies represent purity, and she placed those lilies in Alessandro's hand, and he burned his hand, he said, and he felt them. And when he woke up, he grace and changed. He was living just in that vision. And it was because of Maria's charity, her forgiveness, that finally, that forgiveness finally bore fruit years later. And he completely changed, actually, and he himself died a very holy death.